Senator Ricketts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to our panelists for talking about this important topic. Human trafficking is a despicable crime. And not only does it inflict severe trauma on its victims, but it demonstrates just a sickening disregard for human dignity. As governor of Nebraska, I worked with my Attorney General, Doug Peterson, and my wife, our First Lady, Suzanne Shore, to be able to combat human trafficking in our state with Interstate 80 going through. It's a corridor for this. And we had a four-part plan to do that. One was raising awareness with regard to the public by using rest areas, educating emergency room docs, letting the public know you got to be aware for people who have lost control of their phone, don't have control of their phone, don't have control of their ID. In emergency rooms, if you have, for example, a barcode tattoo, those were sorts of things. So our Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services really focused on trying to raise that awareness from that standpoint. We also, secondly, passed laws to strengthen the penalties for human trafficking and be able to prosecute those cases more effectively. Third, we empower law enforcement to more effectively apprehend criminals through our Operation United Front human trafficking investigation that spanned 12 states. And then finally, we increased the support for survivors who need care and support. I think, Ms. Walsh, you were talking about that as well after experiencing human trafficking. So, Ambassador Dyer, how are our U.S. domestic efforts to combat human trafficking perceived internationally, and how do these perceptions positively or negatively affect U.S. foreign policy efforts in this area?
First of all, Senator, thank you so much for your work in Nebraska. I noted as you were talking about the things that you focused on that they covered all three of the P's. We have prevention, prosecution, and protection, so thank you for your leadership on that. With regard to the U.S. domestic efforts, we cover in our CHIP report the U.S. efforts, and as you will see, we cover them in a great deal of detail. And we have assessed that overall, the U.S. is actually doing a really good job. We maintain our position as a leader in this space. We are increasing not only identified victims, increased prosecutions, identified increasing numbers of victims who are receiving services, as you wisely pointed out, from government-funded programs. All of this is laid out. Obviously, as every country, even those that are on a tier 2, we have room for improvement. We absolutely have room for improvement. One of the things that we have specifically said is that we need to do a better job of making sure that victims of trafficking are not held or penalized for crimes that they were forced to be doing.
But with the efforts the United States doing, I got to believe that helps us when we're trying to make the case internationally that other countries need to do more as well.
I completely agree with you, sir. When we are engaging in our bilateral and multilateral diplomacy, it helps our position when we are recommending changes to other countries, when we can say, look, we hold ourselves accountable too. We recognize when we do stuff good, and we recognize when there's room for improvement. And I think that really strengthens our case and makes that diplomacy much more effective.
Right. I want to switch gears and build on what Senator Risch was talking about with regard to the Uyghurs in Xinjiang province. And about 1 million Uyghurs have been put into these forced labor camps, and about 100,000 are actually doing this forced labor, I should say re-education camps, 100,000 in forced labor. This is just despicable what the PRC is doing, and I certainly understand the challenges that we have in trying to raise awareness with the countries that are supporting this. What further actions does the State Department plan to take to implement the UFLPA and its coordination with the Forced Labor Enforcement Task Force participation?
The JTIP participates in that Forced Labor Enforcement Task Force, and one of our chief missions is to fully implement the Uyghur Forced Labor Protection Act, the UFLPA. What we have been doing so far, as you know, the UFLPA allows anything that is from the Xinjiang region or made with goods to be put on a list that will be preventing those products from coming into the United States. But in addition, each of the members of that Forced Labor Enforcement Task Force can recommend entities to be added to that list. So even if it's not something that's clearly based in that region, That is the area that we've been working most on. You may have seen that we recently voted and added two additional entities to that list. That process is ongoing. In fact, I was working on that earlier before I came in today.
So what challenges do we have? Because European goods are still making it into the European marketplace. What are some of the challenges, and what can we do about it to prevent this? Because, I mean, it's just terrible that the goods made by forced labor in the People's Republic of China are making their way into Europe. This is just horrible. It's despicable.
I think there are two challenges, and I appreciate you asking about them. Number one is we have to be sure that we're doing our due diligence, because these supply chains are extremely complicated, they are complex, and the PRC is engaging in active subterfuge to hide and make it difficult to see clearly these change. It's one of the areas that we actually mentioned in the Trafficking in Persons report, this affirmative effort to make it hard to check to see how the supply chains are working. So this is actually something we brought up, and we want to be sure that we're doing our due diligence. And so that is what is the most difficult part. We are actively engaging on it now to be sure that we are correctly and accurately assessing it so that we can prevent Americans from unwittingly purchasing these products.
Great. Thank you very much.